pray that you'll be blessed, feel blessed by being with us this morning. I thank Brother Dennis for helping read. Is it not good to just hear a brother read out of God's Word? We need to do more of that. Ecclesiastes. The first time that I studied this in any depth was just after we had moved here back in the early 90s. We were a part of a class that Gordon and Cynthia were teaching. We decided that we would study Ecclesiastes. And so we started reading this. And back then, with not good understanding, this is what I thought about Solomon. I thought he was a spoiled brat. I mean, you think about this. Here's a man that was raised at the feet of King David, somebody that God considered a man after his own heart. He saw the relationship that his father had with his Creator. He was blessed with wisdom beyond anybody that had lived at that time. And he was blessed with wealth that would rival the wealthiest by today's standards. And yet he writes, vanity. All is vanity. It's funny how life and time will change your perspective on things. Things that you knew to be true, you go back and you study them again, and you see it in a whole different light. It's not necessarily what you thought it was. And that was the case with Ecclesiastes and Solomon with myself. Oh. Here's what I want. Solomon would go on in Ecclesiastes 2 and he would say this, "Therefore I hated life," this is verse 17, "I hated life because the work that was done under the sun was distressing to me, for all is vanity and grasping for the wind. Therefore I hated life." And then in chapter 4, "Then I returned and considered all the oppression that is done under the sun, and look, the tears of the oppressed, but they have no comforter. On the side of their oppressors there is power, but they also have no comforter. Therefore I praise the dead who are already dead more than the living that are still alive." It's basically saying it is better to be dead than alive. And then in verse 3, "Yet better than both is he who has never existed, who has not seen the evil work." At this point in his life, he's saying, I wished I'd never been born. This is where he was. Brothers and sisters, Solomon was not in a good place, was he? He was in a dark, dark place at this point in time. I've titled this morning's sermon, "The Black Dog." And I want to speak with you for just a few minutes about the seriousness of depression. We've all had times through our lives where we've been sad. Something happens, an event happens, and it affects us. It affects us mentally, it affects us emotionally, and for a period of time we're sad. Depending on that event will determine the duration of that sadness, but eventually it goes away. The sun comes out, and life goes on, and it's kind of like an afternoon shower. You know, it pops up, but then it soon dissipates. What I'm talking about is much more sinister than that. It's a depression is a deep mood of despair. It is like a fog that comes and it hangs and it lingers and we can't shake it. Dictionary would define depression like this: feelings of severe despondency and dejection. I like this next definition, and we'll be using it a few times this morning. It's a feeling of sadness that turns into helplessness, that ends in hopelessness. A feeling of sadness that turns to helplessness, that ends in hopelessness. Depression can be a killer disease. Someone suffering with depression, they will take no solace in the encouraging word, "cheer up." They would love nothing better than to do this, but they can't. They just can't. It's hard for somebody to understand that has not been through that, exactly what the feeling is. In 2015, statistics showed that 16 million adult Americans suffered from depression. 16 million. Another 2.7 million between the ages of 12 and 17. That's almost 19 million total. In 2016, CBS report ranked the states using a percentage of population of those that had suffered from depression during the course of the year. I was really taken aback to discover this. We ranked third. There are only 2 states as a percentage of population that the people reported suffering depression on a more as percentage basis. That was Indiana and Rhode Island. We ranked third. Brothers and sisters, depression, it can visit us all. It is not a respecter of persons, okay? It doesn't matter if you're male or female. It doesn't care about your ethnicity. It doesn't care about your social economic standard. And this morning I want us to understand, it doesn't care if you're unsaved or if you're a child of God. Here are a couple of well-known examples of those that did great things, but they suffered with depression through the majority of their life. Abraham Lincoln, writing to his law partner, this was prior to him becoming president, "I am now the most miserable man living. If what I feel were equally distributed to the whole human family, there would be not one cheerful face on earth. Whether I shall ever be better, I cannot tell. I awfully forebode I shall not. To remain as I am is impossible. I must die or be better, it appears to me." President Lincoln always had a way of penning things. And you can just hear the utter despair in what he's sharing with his partner in this letter. The second picture up here, a lot of you all will recognize, it's Winston Churchill. He's led Great Britain through the World War II. He fought depression his whole life. His wife had sent him a letter and had told him about a psychiatrist who had helped her friend. And he was replying to her, and he said this, "I think this man might be useful to me if my black dog returns. He seems quite away from me now. It is such a relief. All the colors come back into picture." People suffering from depression, they cannot find any joy in anything. Their existence is stark. Everything is black and white. There is no beauty found anywhere. It's an awful, awful thing. We don't often talk about depression from the pulpit. I think that the reason is because we're Christians. Our hope is in one greater than the one in the world, right? And so it almost seems like it's at odds if we have depression. We shouldn't be depressed, right? We should always be happy. Brothers and sisters, we leave out Satan with that kind of thinking. When a prolonged state of sadness starts slipping to helplessness, Satan senses this, and he starts kicking the door in. He'll do anything he can then to take over that situation. And if we are a Christian, he just enjoys it all the more. I can assure you that not myself or anybody sitting in here is beyond the reach of depression if we allow it to progress. Look with me at some of the great leaders of people who dealt with their own black dog. Moses, feeling the weight of the entire Israelite nation, speaking with God, said this, "I am not able to bear all these people alone." Alone is a key word here. "I am not able to bear all these people alone because the burden is too heavy for me. If you treat me like this, please kill me here and now. If I have found favor in your sight, if I have found favor in your sight at all, please kill me. And do not let me see my wretchedness." Elijah, fleeing from Jezebel in 1 Kings 19:4. "But he himself went a day's journey into the wilderness and came and sat down under a broom tree. And he prayed that he might die and said, 'It is enough now, Lord. Take my life, for I am no better than my fathers.'" Over the last few weeks, Chuck has shared with us out of Jonah. And we know the despair that this man went through. In 4:3, Jonah says, "Therefore now, O Lord, please take my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live." Sadness turning to helplessness, ending in hopelessness. The common symptom with people that are suffering from depression is this feeling of being alone, of isolation. It is insidious and it is awful. The feeling is that nobody understands, that nobody cares. In the midst of the entire Israelite nation, Moses felt alone. He told God, "I am not able to bear the burden alone." But we know that it has not been just the biblical figures that have dealt with depression. Brothers and sisters, this black dog, it has visited this family itself way too many times over the last few years. We seem like we kind of shy away from talking about it. I don't know if it's because of the stigma attached to mental health itself. I don't know if it's the feeling that a Christian cannot or should not be depressed. But I think that we've got to start talking about it. If there is anybody here this morning that is currently going through this, or if you're here this morning and you know somebody that is, I want you to know this. I want you to know that you're not alone. There are people that understand, there are people that care, and the reason they do is because they've been through it themselves. This man pictured here with his family is named Jerry Claypool. Jerry fought depression for several months back in May of 1996. He lost that fight and he took his own life. Jerry is my brother-in-law. That's my little sister Mitzi, and there are two children, Cy and Shonda. Several of you knew that this happened to our family, but there are several of you that didn't. And I would imagine that there are several more that are here this morning that have had this happen, or you know of somebody that this has happened to, and nobody knows about it. Depression is a tool of the great deceiver, and he will not hesitate to use it. When we feel helpless, and during a prolonged period of sadness, and Satan comes in and he gets a hold, then he starts pushing us towards hopelessness. That is where we've got to get a hold of this thing, and we've got to get some help. When Satan gets involved, he robs us of our confidence. We start second-guessing everything we do. He robs us of our joy. We cannot find pleasure in anything. He tells us no one will understand, and that we will appear weak if we share what is going on. It's a lie. He places us in a tunnel. And we can see that little light at the end. And then he slowly starts shutting that door until the light is gone. And when the light is gone, then the hope that we have is gone with it. Brothers and sisters, it doesn't have to be this way. Beyond the understanding and the love and care of the church family, there is another. Our Heavenly Father, He loves us immeasurably. His understanding is infinite. When you think that somebody else will not understand or cannot understand, He is always there, and He absolutely understands, and He cares. Is it practical to think that somebody would create a human being and then not care what happens to them? That's not our God. The key is that we have to not let go of Him. We know, we have been told, and we believe, and we are persuaded that He will never let go of us. We can never let go of Him, even in the darkest times of our life. He is greater than he that's in this world, and He will carry us through. Let's go back to Moses. Moses cried out, "I cannot bear the weight of these people alone." Numbers 11, 16, and 17, the Father responds. So the Lord said to Moses, Gather to me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom you know to be the elders of the people and officers over them. Bring them to the tabernacle of meeting, that you may stand there, that they may stand there with you. Then I will come down and talk with you there. I will take the spirit that is upon you, and I will put it upon them, that they may bear the burden of the people with you, that you may not bear it yourself alone. Did God understand what Moses was going through? Did he care? And did he help? He did, didn't he? Whenever you are in this state, Satan just keeps telling you that nobody is there. Brothers and sisters, if you are there, or if you know somebody is there, we need to reach out. We need to help. If they are beyond our limited ability to help, then we need to help them get help. But always remember that the Father is there. He will never leave us. He will never forsake us, and he will bring us through. In our darkest times, he will bring us through. That was an example of how God was present and helped Moses in his time of need. Sometimes we look at the Bible and we think that doesn't apply to us because that only happens to those that have passed. God's children from a long time ago. Brothers and sisters, God is present in our lives. He works in this world, and he will be with us. I want to share just a little bit about what happened on that day back in May when Jerry took his life. And I believe that God was present even in that dark situation. This little guy here, Cy, that's my nephew. He was 10 years old. This picture was taken prior to that, so probably 4 or 5 years after this picture was taken when this happened. Satan had successfully shut the door in Jerry's mind. The light was gone. But God was still present. On that sunny day back in May of 1996, this little boy, now 10, got off the bus with his sister, anticipating to meet their father. When this didn't happen, Shonda, the little girl there, she went to the kitchen to get herself a snack, and Cy went searching for his father. Not finding him in the house, he stepped out onto the back porch. He found his daddy, slumped over, leaning up against the house. He had an immediate awareness of what had happened. He went back into the house, and he took Shonda to the living room, set her on the couch, and turned the TV on. Told her not to move. Then he went back into the kitchen, picked up the phone, and dialed the Baxter County Sheriff's Department and told them what had happened. Why he didn't dial the Mountain Home Police, I don't know. He lived out in the county. They wouldn't have responded. I guess he just knew that. He gave them their home address. He also gave them the address of the dentist's office where his mother worked. He instructed them to send a deputy to pick her up and not to let her drive alone. He then called my dad, his granddad, and told him to come to the house as fast as he could. He then hung up the phone, went back out onto the porch. He removed the pistol from his daddy's hand, unloaded it, wiped it down, and put it back into the gun case. He then stopped and got a towel and dampened it, went back out onto the porch, and he cleaned his daddy up. He then returned back into the house and sat on the couch with his sister until my dad and the sheriff's department showed up. He is an extraordinary young man, and people that know him will tell you that he is very mature for his age. He was 10 years old. You can't tell me that our father was not there in that house with Cy, guiding him, letting him do what he needed to do. 10-year-old boys just don't act like that. Brothers and sisters, the shepherds of this congregation, we are committed to making available, if there's anybody in need, help. Our Father has given man the ability to come up with medicines. He has allowed us to train individuals in how the mind works so that he can help. We need to be taking advantage of these if they're needed. And we are committed to making these services available to this church family, regardless of ability to pay. There's not helplessness. There's not hopelessness. There is help and there is hope. As I wrap up this morning, and I know this was not very long, I want to share one more thing with you. In the past, there have been statements that infer that an individual who, suffering from depression, takes their own life, removes their hope of eternity with the Father. Brothers and sisters, if our Father, in the twinkling of an eye, can renew a broken and twisted body, He can do the same with a broken and twisted mind. And we need to be very careful when we talk about this. We need to leave the judging up to a merciful Father that understands. This merciful Father, He knew us all before we were formed. Today, He knows the numbers of every hair that's in our head. He loves us. He loves us so much that He offered up His Son as an atonement for our sin, that we could be redeemed back to Him. This morning, if you're here and you're hurting, would ask you to come forward. If you are here and you have never named the name of Christ, we'd ask you to come forward. Baptistry's ready. It's warm. It's cold outside, but it's warm. If we can help you in any way, we'd ask you to come forward as we stand and as we sing.